I'm going down south, I'm gonna have myself a time.
I've always been a fan of the South Park TV show. I wasn't that interested in the N64 games when they came out because Nintendo typically leans towards kid-friendly type material, so I figured the South Park games would be watered down compared to the show, which made me uninterested. But it looks like I was wrong because these games definitely included enough piss, shit, and blood that would have made me a happy camper. But the question still remains, how is the gameplay?
Dude, this is pretty up right here.
All these games I'm going to talk about were released on other consoles like the PlayStation and the Dreamcast, but I'm just going to focus on the N64 versions because those are the ones I own. It was developed by Iguana Entertainment, who also made the Turok games for the Nintendo 64. Also, it was published by Acclaim and released in 1998 when the show was just in its second season. The game acts like a first-person shooter, but instead of bullets, you have snowballs to start off with, and there's a radar system that tells you when enemies are near. Did I say enemies? I mean turkeys. Just hordes of endless, disgusting turkeys everywhere. The basic plot of the game is supposed to be that all sorts of crazy stuff is going to happen because this alien meteor is approaching. You know, the designers could have went wild with their imaginations with that kind of plot and had all sorts of stuff attacking the South Park kids, but the best that they could come up with was endless flocks of turkeys? Yeah, Mattei. The stupid turkeys approach you so rapidly that there's not much time to react. You'll just get tackled by them constantly. The main thing that's bad about the gameplay is that there's so little variation. There's no puzzles or anything to solve. You just shoot stuff and that's it. The controls are the same as in Turok 2 Seeds of Evil. You move around with the yellow C buttons and throw snowballs with the Z trigger. Sometimes it works okay, but when you have to aim at anything that's high or low, it can become really wonky. At the end of the third level is a giant robot turkey boss fight. By this point, you'll have acquired more weapons like balls, plungers, and an egg-shooting gun. These are fine for killing normal turkeys and the tank turkeys that are throughout the level, but during this boss fight, you have to aim upwards at its head, and the way the controls work, it's incredibly hard to aim. You're trying to walk backwards to avoid being trampled on, but you have to use the control stick to aim at the same time. Some people may be able to do this, but I think that the majority of people who play this would have a hard time trying to master the weird control style. I personally find it terrible. As for the graphics, if it were another franchise, I would say that the graphics were bad, but since the animation on the show is done in a simple style, I think that the graphics are passable. It does at least faithfully recreate the look of the show. The music mostly just loops, and the turkey sound effects get annoying fast. As for the other sound effects, you just hear your character saying the same phrases over and over, and it gets annoying. Not much thought went into the level design. The stages are dull and hard to navigate. There's arrows to show you where to go, but they aren't of much help, because some of the arrows don't lead you in the right direction. Some of them direct you to an area that has power-ups or something, so you'll end up wandering around in the snow searching for signposts that may or may not be directing you towards the finish line. What this game really needed was a map system, but there is none, so that's bad. The game is very repetitive. The only reason I can think to play it again is maybe to try out the 4-player multiplayer mode. The multiplayer mode is slightly better than the single-player mode, but not by much. I read somewhere that the frame rate becomes poor if you have 4 people playing at the same time, but I haven't tried that myself because nobody wants to play this thing. Can't blame them, why would you when there's so many better games you could be playing?
I've had enough of this crap!
I have very mixed emotions about the Nintendo 64 in general. I want to love the system because it had some great games like Zelda, Smash Bros, and GoldenEye, but I have to admit, a lot of them, like this one, age about as well as milk. You'd think that this would be a surefire win with me because I love South Park and I love Nintendo, but if I take off my rose-colored glasses, all I can see is a stinky, spoiled mess. Overall, the game had a nice presentation and a sense of humor, which are good, but the gameplay needed a lot more work. I do not recommend it, but let's move on. The second South Park game was called Chef's Love Shack, released in 1999. This game is full of all the raunchy humor that you'd expect from the show, much more so than the other games, and it should please the fans of the TV series, at least in that respect. The plot of the game is that Chef gets his own game show on public access television, which I think is a cool idea.
I'm your host, Chef. Today, one of our lucky ladies is going to win a passion-filled weekend with me.
Having this be a game show actually gives the humor a much-needed chance to shine.
My ass is eternally grateful.
There's so many characters and show references, it seems like a good game at first. But in a little while, when that wears off, you're left with a gameplay experience that quickly becomes redundant. You can play with up to 4 characters: Kyle, Cartman, Stan, or Kenny. You spin a wheel to see what's going to happen. Then you have to answer a variety of funny questions, so it can be good the first time around, just to hear the absurd categories and the answers, but they lose their charm quick. The game also has Double Dare style challenges where you play mini-games. Similar to the Mario Party games, it randomly chooses one of the mini-games, and some are better than others. A lot of the mini-games are just copies of classic arcade-style games like Donkey Kong, Asteroids, Circus, and Warlords. There's one called Spank the Monkey where you have to remember the order of how the monkey's asses get spanked. It's just like the memory game Simon. The one that I found the funniest was this one where you have to guess which of the bushes the hillbilly is hiding in. If you pick the wrong one, he fulfills his dream and fucks the chicken. That is ridiculous. This is a game that absolutely has to be played with another person, because it'd be pretty sad if you're sitting there alone laughing at this stuff by yourself.
Yeah, I'll spank it even faster.
As a single-player game, it's pretty terrible, so play it with a friend. This is probably the best of the 3 N64 South Park games because of all the references to the show and the nasty humor. It's definitely a fan-pleaser at the very least. It's got a lot of humor, and some of the mini-games are okay, but after the initial novelty of the jokes wear off, it gets old. If you're a big South Park fan, you might enjoy it for a few minutes, but for the average gamer, I just recommend playing Mario Party. It's definitely not something that was worth $50 when it was released. So again, I don't really recommend it. For the final South Park game on the N64, this time they tried a racing game. I think the thought by this point was probably, well, Mario Kart's successful, we'll replace the Nintendo characters with South Park characters, how can we go wrong? Well, they went wrong alright, because this is the worst one of the bunch. So the first game was done by Iguana Entertainment, Chef's Love Shack was developed by Acclaim, and this one was done by Tantalus. No matter whose hands the South Park license fell under, nobody could seem to make anything worth playing, let alone spending $50 on. The races themselves aren't just linear like you'd expect. In most racing games, the goal is to get to the end of the lap and be first, but not here. In South Park Rally, the goal is to hit different checkpoints to complete an entire lap. There's no order in which you collect the checkpoints, so you basically just race all over randomly, often revisiting areas that you've already been to. It's just a confusing mess. Trying to turn corners is terrible. If you want to go around a curve, you just have to slow down. It's really just carelessly designed. Sometimes they'll add another element to it that you have to collect a trophy before you can cross the checkpoints. Usually who's ever in the lead will have the trophy. If you lose the trophy, you'll have to retrieve it before you can cross the checkpoints again. So you'll have to chase down whoever has it, but they can be halfway across the track. So by the time you get it back from them, you'll have to travel all the way back to a checkpoint which can be on the opposite side of the track. You'll be crisscrossing all over the place trying to do this. And it doesn't help that if you hit anything in the slightest, your cart will be flung across the screen and usually stuck somewhere, giving the other racers the chance to steal the trophy back. This has to be the absolute worst racing game that I've ever played. Forget the graphics, the music, and the humor, because none of that matters when the gameplay is this god-awful. Does this game have any replay value? Well, you should never even play it in the first place unless you're trying to torture yourself. There's a lot of characters that you can unlock, which would be a reason to keep playing if the game didn't suck. And it's a shame, because the concept of a South Park racing game had a lot of potential, but the execution here was horrible. Overall, it seemed like Acclaim was much more interested in marking the South Park name and getting kids to buy it because of the familiar characters they liked from the show, than bothering to make a solid game that's worth playing. The games you should play instead of these disasters are Turok 2, Mario Party, and Super Mario Kart, the classics that they were modeled after. So if you want South Park, just watch the show.
Come on down South Park and meet some friends now.